are we today, Maria?
I am doing well. I'm excited for episode 2 of our podcast. We have an exciting topic to chat about today. We're going to be talking about the future of fitness in Australia with no one better than the CEO of Fitness Australia, Barrie Elvish. How did you come to know Barrie in the fitness industry?
Yeah, look, we met recently. I mean, obviously, a bit of a background in regards to Fitness Australia. It's kind of like in many respects, the governing authority, within Australia for fitness professionals. Like, it's not required. I mean, you don't need to be a Fitness Australia member to stay, registered or certified as a PT. But obviously, it is a position that they've held for the last few decades, and I think they've gone through a bit of struggles with relevance in the last few years, and
Yeah.
and Barry's kind of come from outside the fitness industry. I think, as you mentioned today, just with a fresh set of eyes. And look, the discussions I've had with him so far, he's been really kind of proactive on wanting to kind of, raise the level of relevance for PTs, and in particular, like with all of these lockdowns that we've been going
Yeah.
through, especially here in Australia, like having PT classified as an essential service,
Yeah.
so that obviously, if and when a lockdown occurs or there's something like that, PTs and gyms are actually still able to remain open. The
Yeah.
same way that a chiropractor can or a doctor can. Getting PTs and health and fitness professionals categorized, in that same kind of vein, and obviously coming in from a place of prevention, but also from helping from mental health aspects and things
Yeah.
like that. So look,
I
Barry's really kind of pushing that agenda here in Oz.
And that's really important. I know that when we had our lockdowns initially here in the United States in Chicago, PTs and
You
gyms.
guys might go back to them, like with some of the rhetoric you have coming out of the states at the moment.
Let's hope that does not come to
I
existence.
hope not.
But we saw, I remember I was out of work for about a month, I
Yeah.
wasn't considered essential. The gyms weren't considered essential, which, I personally, as a health coach, think that maintaining your health, gyms are necessary for that. So it definitely hit us hard, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it does not happen again. So me
Mm.
and including all the other PTs here in the city don't get hit hard by not being considered essential. I'm really excited to chat
Yeah.
with the CEO.
But
Just
I think, yeah, look, it's good to get Barry on. Obviously, there's a lot of lessons that I think can internationally, to different government bodies and things like that. He's I think a lot of time in the fitness industry too, people kind of get kind of stuck in the kind of the same networks and circles. And obviously, again, he's coming with a fresh set of eyes, no agendas, no strings attached, and he's doing a
Let's
really
hope
good
so.
job so far. So that's why I wanted to get him on.
I'm really excited to chat with him and see what he has to say. I actually have never, this is the first time I've actually learned about Barry and looked into him. And, I'm intrigued at what he has to say about all things fitness and seeing if there's ways that we could translate that here in the United States.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's get him on.
Hi, Barry. Pleasure to have you on.
Hi Maria, how are you? Good morning. Good morning, Dane.
Hey,
How
Barry, how are you, mate? You well?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate.
I'm very
That's good.
happy
That's
that
good.
you were able to access Riverside. We are very excited to use this platform for our podcast to get to chat with you today. Let's dive right into it. I know our listeners are excited to
Definitely.
hear what you have to say today. So, for our viewers and listeners who may not be super familiar with you, do you mind giving us a little bit more information about how you started in the fitness industry and your journey that led you to become the CEO of Fitness Australia?
Well, Maria, that's a long journey, and I guess I ended up in the fitness industry almost by by default. So, my professional background started off as a senior secondary teacher, primarily in outdoor education. And when I left teaching, I went to work for an organisation in South Australia called the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is a program for young people under the age of 25, which also includes outdoor activity and so on. While I was there, one of my mentors at the stage said, look, there's a lot of opportunities in the not-for-profit sector in Australia in the future. And this was many, many years ago. And so I went back to university and did an MBA. And since then, I've worked as the CEO in the not-for-profit sector for the last 23 years in a range of areas from disability services, employment services, welfare services, but primarily in early childhood education in Queensland. And I was about to, I left that a few years back, and then I've been working in regional Victoria for another not-for-profit as a CEO down there, and I was about to go back to Queensland in retirement to take up my surfing career again back on the Gold Coast, where we had an apartment at the time. And I got a call from a recruiter saying, how'd you like to go and work for an organisation called Fitness Australia in Sydney? And although I'm not from the fitness sector, I've been an amateur athlete most of my life, been a runner, completed numerous half marathons and a few marathons and so on. I never thought about going to Sydney, but my two sons live in Sydney, and so that was a big attraction to go there or come here. Initially, it was for a 6-month contract because Fitness Australia had got itself into a few difficulties, and most of my time in the not-for-profit sector has been going in and doing organisational restructures and reviews and so on. And we did a strategic review of the organisation and its strategic priorities. We launched those publicly at the last live Filex event, which seems a long, long time ago now. And
It does.
It does, Dane. And I was pleased to see that went down pretty well with the people who are at Filex, but then they started saying, well, this is a lovely new plan, etc., but who's going to deliver it if the CEO for 6 months? So the board sort of said, would I be prepared to stay on? And I said, look, as long as you think I'm adding value, as long as I'm getting some enjoyment out of it, I'm happy to stay on and see what we can do with the association and the sector. So that's how I got there. It's been not coming.
As I was saying,
sorry,
I was saying to Maria prior to coming on, one of the, I think, benefits of you coming into the position with Fitness Australia is actually being that you come from another sector, because it's coming with a fresh set of eyes. There's no kind of, allegiances. There's no anything like that. It's fresh. It's raw. It's kind of call a spade, see it for what it is, and kind of go from there. And I think it's, Fitness Australia has definitely, domestically in particular, the last kind of 12 to 18 months, taken on a greater, I think a public position within our industry once again, as it should have, as the, governing body, within Australia.
Absolutely, Dane. It has been. Raw is an interesting word because it has so many connotations, but you're quite right.
Yeah.
In that coming in from outside meant that people were not backwards in being forwards in telling me what was everything that was wrong with Fitness Australia. And I'd have to say, coming in from outside, I think a lot of those criticisms were pretty valid. As an industry association, we hadn't probably done what I would expect an industry association to do. And look, there was a lot of, I learned very quickly some of the statements about Fitness Australia being the boys club, the Sydney Mafia, and so on and so on, and in all those sort of stories, there's a fraction of truth in that, but yeah, we've worked very hard since then to address those issues.
I always say in life, things are only a mistake if you keep doing them, right? So I think sometimes change can be painful, but also really positive, which kind of links into I'd say our first core key question is, like, in terms of your vision for Fitness Australia, where is it currently at, and where do you kind of see it going, across the next few years within Australia? Obviously, you and I have had a few discussions prior to this about kind of your intentions, but for the listeners out there, like, what is Fitness Australia? What does it do, and where is it going?
Okay, well, there's about 4 questions in that. So, Fitness Australia is the industry association for venues and for personal trainers, exercise professionals working in those venues. So we are the largest association covering that area. We have offices in Perth, Victoria, Brisbane, South Australia and New South Wales. Our prime role, I guess, is to make sure or try and raise standards, advocate on behalf of the industry and our members. We have about 65% of facilities are members of Fitness Australia, and probably a similar number of personal trainers. So that's I guess what our main role is, advocacy, and we do that through research and links with government and so on. Where's Fitness Australia at the moment is a really interesting question, Dane. I think, and not wishing to downplay the impact that COVID's had on our sector as it has across the whole economy, and we can talk about that a little bit later and the impact it's had, and it has been significant and quite damaging.
Oh, look, Maria and I were talking about it before, obviously and they're not having to deal with what we're having to deal with.
Yeah.
It looks like for now we're in the clear, but like we were talking about, the first time we went into lockdown, we weren't considered essential, and I suffered about a month to 2 months of not being able to work. And a lot of trainers and PTs are kind of worrying about, is this going to happen again this coming fall and winter, and what are ways that we can kind of avoid that from happening and help save us during that time period if by any chance we might not be able to work at all.
Yeah, and that is the same question in a way, or the answer to that question is the same that Dane has just asked me. Where do we see Fitness Australia at the moment? And I think that COVID has given the association a once in a lifetime opportunity to actually shift thinking in the community and government and policymakers. You're quite right, Maria. We were shut down, as you guys were 18 months ago, 24 hours notice, no consultation, along with cafes, bars, hotels, casinos, you name it, all those sort of things. And the obvious question was, well, how come a physiotherapist could offer a one-on-one rehab program in a gym during lockdown, but an exercise professional personal trainer couldn't? The simple answer to that is they're regulated, we're not. And out of I guess, the last 18 months, what we have learned is that the fitness industry has, I guess, suffered from a bit of myopia. I think we've operated in an echo chamber. The industry sector has grown very well, as you would know more than I do. But I think also it hasn't taken the time. The good news about what we do out in the wider community. We have, 3.5, 4 million sector. We have a very strong membership base there, and we know that our activity is essential. But key decision makers, policy makers, health department people, etc., are still operating on outdated of what a fitness centre, leisure centre, gym, call it what you like, actually is, what it does. They still think in many cases we are full of young, pumped up on steroids, whatever, looking at themselves in the mirror and so on.
Oh yeah.
They think we run dirty, unclean, unhygienic facilities. They think we're all about vanity, looking good, and so on and so on. So what this has done for us, I think, is give us an unbelievable opportunity to reposition ourselves. And the challenge for Fitness Australia and the sector is to take this opportunity and use it to the benefit of the sector, but also the wider community, because if the wider community benefits, so does the sector. So the critical thing that we need to do moving forward, and we're lucky in Australia, you guys have just had an election in the States, Maria. We've got one coming up in the next 12 months. It could come as early as this year.
Yeah.
We need to get onto the public discussion. What is an essential service?
Yes.
And we need to be able to push the line very strongly that fitness, exercise, physical activity is not a sport. It does not sport and recreation departments. It belongs in the health department, because what we do has a health outcome. We know it's physical, and now what's come out very loud and clear is the mental health outcome of exercise. Every day during the lockdown, the politicians, the health people will say, you go outside for 4 reasons here in Australia: critical shopping, go and see a doctor, medical appointments and chemists and so on, exercise. Okay, we know this. And so, and recently as yesterday, Victorian government here in Australia has given us a grant to employ a psychologist to work with our Victorian members because of the impact of COVID. So the discussion is taking place. The evidence is there. It's international research and all the rest of it. The problem is here in Australia, politicians, health people haven't drawn the dots to understand that a lot of exercise, and I'm specifically using the word exercise, not fitness. A lot of exercise takes place in our venues and with our personal trainers out in the parks and in the community areas and so on. We need to use this opportunity to get exercise, not fitness, exercise, physical activity, out of sport and recreation and under health. It infuriates me that so much money is given to mental health dealing with a problem after the issue has become a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, look,
rather
it's
than dealing with it beforehand.
Yeah.
PTs, and I'm sure this is a topic I know you're very passionate about too, Maria. Like, in essence, what we're as personal trainers are providing is, in some respects, preventative health care. Really,
Agreed.
and I've said that for 10, 15 years. Like, not being able to go and train, not being able to, sweat and and just stimulate that feeling, the endorphins, the endocrine response, the all of the mental health aspects that come with that. Like, I don't like life without it myself. You know what I mean? And I'm just like the rest of us, right? So being told that you can't go and do that, just as a consumer of fitness and exercise myself, let alone an educator, but as a consumer myself, like not being able to do that, is I won't use the terminology on the podcast, but it's painful.
Yeah, and I think as a health and fitness professional, it's frustrating not only as someone like you said that pursues training and exercises, my own preventative care, my own way of managing my mental health as well, along with my physical health. It's frustrating to me to see that there's that lack of priority in preventative health that can come from exercise and nutrition, and all of these things are downplayed as a priority, especially in times like a pandemic, which is quite surprising. And here in the United States, I've noticed that a lot of governing bodies and officials tend to pull away from talking about that as being a priority and not seen as essential.
There's a very simple answer to that, Maria. Preventative health has a reasonably long lead time to get the results. It takes a generation or something like that.
Yeah.
Politicians, unfortunately, work with electoral cycles, so they work on 3 or 4 years. And if you've got a mental health problem which has been acknowledged in the community, it's simpler and easier to say we'll throw millions of dollars at giving rehab services or counselling services. So you've got to turn the discussion around to a different point. And when I was working in early childhood, we had this situation here in Australia where 10 years ago we put up a case to the federal government that kindergarten programs had to be available for all 4-year-olds in Australia. They weren't at that stage. And there's an educational argument for that because there's better outcomes for children. They have less drug addiction and higher employment and so on and so on. That we took to the government was the other side, which was the economic argument. And the economic argument is actually showing there's a seven times return on every dollar spent.
That's the only, let's be honest, money talks, BS walks, and I think that's the only way really that you were probably going to get a short-term result from pushing the agenda, I would assume, at least from what you're saying, Barry.
But similarly, Dane, at the moment, we know there is going to be internationally huge budget deficits, across the OECD countries. And the research that I've seen coming out of America and Europe shows that the return on a dollar in preventative health, rather than early childhood, but preventative health, is between 4 and 6 times. So, for every dollar spent, there's going to be a saving to the taxpayer of 4 to 6 times, not having to be spent on obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular, mental health, and so on and so on. So we need to get that data together, and we need to have that as part of the argument to go to the government, because the second part of getting away from sport and under health is to encourage the government to fulfil its commitment to the GAPA treaty, whereby the GAPA campaign, where they signed up in 2018 to get 15% more Australians working by 2030. Now, since then, the government has done absolutely zip on that federally. Most state governments have introduced activity vouchers or exercise vouchers for kids and that sort of gear. Federal government's done nothing. Hopefully, with the Olympics coming to Australia in 2032 now being confirmed, there'll be an upsurge in interest about physical activity and exercise. The government needs to do this. Need to spend. It's a budget saving. It's a good community outcome, and it plays into our agenda as well. So, as I say, COVID for us has been a great opportunity.
So for the fitness professionals that you see that are going through the tough of all the pandemic going around all around the world, what words of advice would you have to share with fitness professionals entering the industry or current fitness professionals in the industry?
Maria, it's a really difficult time for the industry. I was talking to an RTO earlier on this morning, one of our training organisations, because we have student memberships as part of our memberships. We have almost 8,000 student members. That number in the last 6 months has been slowly going down. It's interesting because it actually went up to the highest level ever 12 months ago, and since then it's starting to drop. And speaking of this RTO this morning, they were telling us that they're having difficulties keeping students engaged and that sort of gear. I also know, speaking to some of the larger franchise groups here of the gyms, that there's a lot of PTs leaving the sector. It's not surprising. I mean, they're getting bashed by the media, not by the media, sorry, by politicians and health people telling them that, they're unsafe, it's unhygienic and so on. So it's a hard decision to get yourself to it as a career. But what I would say as encouragement,
just to add to that point, though, Barry, like we can definitely reaffirm that ourselves. Like there's definitely a decrease, I think, right now within Australia, in particular, of people wanting to get into the sector. Yeah. Because now when people are looking at career changes, they're having to do almost a risk profile analysis. Yeah. Like, will this, if in the worst case scenario, can I still work? And right now, for our sector, unless you have an online presence, which is another different skill set, and it's obviously a bit more new in the fitness industry and people aren't as well versed in, majority of PTs in our country are still working in gym. Yeah. So it's we've also seen that, and then even with we've seen it in particular with Melbourne and Sydney, the most hardest hit with the lockdowns, that the standard customer that is buying ongoing education for those two markets within Australia right now is doing them on payment plans, because they obviously don't have the capital to purchase them up front. So they're doing like $0 down options, deferring payments for a month, and spreading out the payment over 6 months. And these might be only for a $300 or $400 course. Yeah. So not an overly significant life-changing sum of money, but we've definitely seen, consumer trends shift in terms of how people are acquiring their education in this current pandemic.
Yeah, and look, years ago when I was playing AFL at school level, I remember he didn't make it up with the coach saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going sort of business, which is a lovely throwaway line, but there is some truth in that. And I think if there's any sort of people viewing this who are thinking about leaving or thinking about joining the industry, I'd come back to my opening comments. I think we're actually at a pivotal point here, and that I think the opportunity for the sector to actually move into a different environment and different thinking is actually there. And I do believe that in the future there will be a very strong career path for personal trainers. I think we will be classified as essential services. Yeah. And with that will come more security with employment, less lockdowns, and so on and so on. It's interesting that the discussion in the media has changed over the last 12 months, in particular the last 6 months here in Australia, about the importance of exercise and gyms. And now gyms are we're no longer sort of automatically labelled as unsafe or unhygienic. The story is now coming around, okay, people need to exercise and gyms are a valid area for this to happen. Personal trainers, not just on gyms, but exercise and personal trainers outdoors where you're sitting down, what looks like with your backdrop there, it's being recognised.
I'm on my deck.
Right, lucky you, mate. There was a story in the Queensland media yesterday. They are safe and how people appreciate going back to them. So I think the future for our sector, and let's not kid ourselves, it's going to be difficult over the next 6 to 12 months, absolutely. But for those that are prepared to hang in there, and those that are prepared to actually come in now, I think the future is going to be very, very bright, because the professional respect for us is going to improve. I think we will move into the health portfolio. I think exercise will be considered essential. I know, because I've had discussions at the moment with private health funds, that they will be recognising exercise professionals for rebates for the health fund members. And I'm hoping down the track at some stage, maybe not in my tenure at Fitness Australia, some stage down the track, we'll actually come into Medicare rebates, not just private health, but Medicare exercise. So all this talk about exercise, the emphasis on it, the government is going to have to get involved in preventative health programs sooner rather than later, just because of the budgetary implications. We are sitting in the right place. So I think the future is going to be bright, but I don't want to be good in the lily here. It's going to be tough for a while yet, but for those that are prepared to stay in, those that are prepared to come in now and commit themselves to it, they will make a success out of it.
Well, we did actually recently, we did a bit of a market analysis on kind of employment trajectory and stuff like that, actually of interest. And that basically, around 2019, kind of pre-pandemic, there was circa 130,000, 120 to 130,000 people employed in fitness roles within Australia. That dropped last year to around 60, 65,000. But the government projections that are there between now and 2024, 2025, is that will actually go back up to 180, 200,000. So like if you look at data and the stats on it, and obviously like we looked at it from a state of, okay, well, there's a big shift in the market right now. How can we, pivot business wise to adapt to what's happening? And initially when I saw the stats, it was like, wow, like that's almost a 50% drop off in the case of 18 months of PTs and things like that in the sector. But I think to add to your point, Barry, if trainers are able to hold on and stay with it, like they'll be able to kind of be almost some of the core pillars of the community over the next 4 or 5 years, because we're looking to in essence 2 to 3 times our current kind of.
Yeah, and Dane, I was speaking to a guy from the States earlier on this year who did a report for an organisation called the Harrison something. They did a report on technology in the sector and the projections for the future. And unfortunately for gym owners, particularly big boxes, basically the data is indicating that big boxes are going to experience some sort of problems in their financial viability moving forward. But personal trainers are going to have a growth, and it comes out of the digital technology which is coming through as well. Personal trainers being able to tap into the digital technology of individuals, and the growth rates over the next 10 and 20 years is over 100% in terms of personal trainers, the shift towards a personal trainer, not necessarily a gym, but they're using the personal trainer as the focus, as the conduit, rather than the facility. So they may be in a facility, they may be outdoors, they may be in both. So the data and the projections moving forward are very clearly in favour of the personal trainer.
Given all of the data and the projections, what would you think are specific skills that you think people in the fitness industry should be focusing on developing right now? We talked about education, and there are plenty of courses that I personally took from Clean Health even during the pandemic. But what are other specific skills that we could work on to really propel us in that projection past once COVID starts to dial down and end?
Maria, it won't come any surprise to you, but the whole exercise environment is all about relationships,
right? And
the interpersonal skills that an individual has. I mean, I've sat in on some RTO courses where they've had the kids, young people doing their courses and stuff, and you look at the people in the audience and you can almost look at them and talk to them, and you know which ones are going to make a success out of it and which ones aren't. Yeah. And it's those ones that have actually got empathy for their fellow citizens, other people in the community, those that can show that empathy, that sort of relationship skill building. And I guess in a way, and I'm sorry for the guys that are listening, but 2/3 of our membership are females, and I think that our personal trainers, and I think the skill set of being able to empathise, have that relationship comes easier to females in many ways, and so I think males are going to have to learn those skills as well.
Look, ask any wife or partner and she'll confirm what you're saying. Like, I think it's something, even if I go back to my journey as a PT, I came out of the military and came up from a very hard upbringing, so initially as a trainer myself back in the days, it was like I was quite militaristic with my coaching style. I used to kind of be known as boot camp Dane, like give me more reps and like really in your face. And I learned that initially that attracted me a certain type of client. Yeah. And people come to me that were very serious about their training, and kind of wanting to go from an intermediate stage to an advanced stage. But the reality is that was a niche of the market. Yeah. And what I learned was a lot of people, were finding, like, I'd be in a gym. Yes, I was personable, but they'd find my approach and my coaching style a bit too in your face. So when I actually pull that back and be a bit more adaptive and actually connect with people, I was able to actually service a greater variety of clients. And I think ultimately as well, like, right now, like, yes, it's important to be able to niche as a fitness professional. You might work with, corporate women or corporate men or housewives or stay-at-home dads or whatever that might be. But I think being able to adapt to any and all situations right now in terms of potential clients is important, because, you know, a lot of people also don't have the, you know, the financial ability to invest into coaching. So, you know, I think the more that you can attract, the better.
Yeah, I mean, look, the talk about the, you know, activity and the importance of that, the digital, all this sort of things coming forward in the future, I think just as important, if not more importantly, is the ability to have connectivity with people and with communities. So the data coming out of the UK from their opening up from lockdowns has indicated that independent gyms, single site gyms, have been able to reopen and get their members back quicker than the larger franchise and big box groups. Now, when you dig into that, it's got a lot to do with their involvement in community and their sense of a community within their gym and their gym membership base, because it's not a cookie cutter approach, it's an independent gym approach. And I think those soft skills, the importance also of being able to relate to the client you're working with. I mean, I've unfortunately experienced firsthand a new person coming to a gym of my age, which is much probably put you two guys together, and that's about where you're going to get.
Pretty spot on, actually, mate.
he was lined up with a young, you know, a new young PT, and this PT was doing what you used to do, I think, Dane. Give me more, go harder, go harder. And I actually said to this guy, if you're not careful, this guy's going to have a heart attack. This is his first day in the gym. Be very, very careful. So it's understanding the context of the people you're dealing with. You know, try and get to understand who they are as individuals and what goals do they want to achieve as individuals. Not do you want to achieve as a personal trainer. What do they want to achieve?
That's super important. I think sometimes, and you can relate to this too, because, you know, obviously, Maria, you're in the trenches coaching clients week in, week out. But I think sometimes coaches project their goals onto the client rather than actually sitting back and listening.
And I think, you know, as a coach, sometimes I have to take a step back, knowing that, you know, fitness and health and fitness is my life. So for me, these things come really easily. But a lot of the clients that enter the gym doors to hire me as a coach don't really know anything, and I can't assume that they know everything, or will it be easy for them. I do, like, for example, have a bunch of moms who juggle working, you know, full-time and kids, and knowing that maybe simple things like meal prepping or staying on track with their step goals may not be as easy. And it's teaching me, each client is teaching me to be more relatable and understanding, and knowing that, like you said, no cookie cutter approach is going to be able to help everybody, and knowing how to have that empathy and knowing it's going to be hard, but there are ways around it, and having that toolbox of ways to navigate those issues really helps not only the success of the client, but, you know, success as a trainer, being able to reach more people, understand more people, that way also retaining more people and helping them reach their goals.
Maria, you just made a very interesting comment there when you said when they step through the door. And I think a lot of people understand how hard it is for some people to step through the door of a gym. And I think that is critical for many people. That is a huge step, and it's their next reaction or their next interaction with a personal trainer is going to be whether they stay or leave. And there's no textbook that can tell you this is how you have to react to this person, because they've had to go through their own thought processes, whatever it is, to get through that door. And for many people, walking into a gym for the first time, and I can absolutely, you know, vouch this myself as a person that's you know, interested in fitness, walking through the first gym I went through the first time is a big step. And so for many other people, it's going to be much harder. So that first, you know, when they say receptionists are the chief customer relationships manager in big businesses, that's because they have that interaction, and that interaction, that first one, is critical.
And I think that's on that point, like, you know, for trainers listening right now, I think to reinforce that, can't reiterate enough, like, Maria, you know, you're a pro bikini athlete, you do pro shows and compete in things like, you know, for me, I grew up, my granddad was an Olympic weightlifter, Commonwealth Games gold medalist. So I grew up around weights when there was a gym in my parents' house and my grandparents' house when I was 4 years old back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So like a barbell, having steak and eggs for breakfast, this was what was indoctrinated into me as a young child. I used to think that was normal.
Yeah.
And then I grew up and realized that it wasn't, you know, so I had to learn to kind of, you know, take myself away from what I was used to, what my experience was around health and fitness, and kind of really learn to relate it back to someone, you know, to your point, Barry, that you know, they might be 30, 40 years old and have never stepped in a gym, you know, and they walk into a gym and see, you know, a bunch of physically imposing people that you kind of see on commercials and stuff like that, and that can be really, really intimidating, for just the average punter.
Absolutely.
I think you also brought up a good point about boutique gyms. And, for example, Maria, works in a boutique gym. So, I'm sure, Maria, you could have worked in Equinox, which is the Australian equivalent of like a Fitness First or something like that. But you chose to work in a boutique gym. A Clean Health, as a lot of our listeners know, started in boutique gyms. We were one of the first real all boutique gyms back in Australia that was kind of not a Vision, not a Anytime, but was a standalone business back in 2012. Where do you kind of see that paradigm shift? Because I'm definitely seeing it from our students, Barrie. And when you do the survey, do you work in a big box gym or do you work in a boutique gym? Slowly but surely, year after year, the pendulum is switching.
Yeah. From
kind of working, the students are working in the big three, kind of like your Fitness First, your Good Life, your Anytime Fitness, to Joe's Performance Centre in Wagga Wagga, or Enterprise Fitness down in Melbourne, or Spear Performance in Chicago, one of our affiliate sites over there. Maria, where are you seeing that shift occurring, Barrie?
That's a difficult question for me to answer, to be quite honest, Dane, because I haven't actually thought about that. I think it's a shift, or if it's just really a transition. I think that the market is going to have opportunities for all different sort of service delivery types. There's always going to be a marketplace for the big, because they're I mean, I go to a franchise group now because it's the closest gym to where I live.
We've seen with like a few of our students, in particular in Sydney and Melbourne, there's one particular student that comes to play, and he had, they've basically got a one-on-one personal training gym. It's in the kind of northwest of Sydney. And so they're sandwiched around like Anytimes and Fitness First, stuff like that. And they were doing about 150 one-on-one PT appointments with, 6 or 7 trainers pre-pandemic. Pre this recent lockdown, they were doing 400. So in 14 months, their business has tripled. His staff has gone up to 20 now. And, apart from obviously saying, well done, mate, the feedback that's come to him is that people don't want to be in commercial gyms around all of these people. They want to be in boutique environments now, to be honest, due to COVID, due to not just wanting to be around the masses. They're wanting to be within these boutique businesses within a 5-10 kilometre radius of their home.
Yeah, and obviously convenience is a critical part. And what we know during the COVID situation is that gyms that have struggled in reopenings and then lockdown reopening, et cetera, has been the CBD gyms, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. And that's primarily because the workforce hasn't come back and they don't have the foot traffic out the door. I mean, I've been in a franchise, as I said, I'm in a franchise gym at the moment. They work very, very hard at creating a community in that particular gym. I've been to another one. They weren't remotely interested in creating that. It was just purely come through the door, pay your money on automatic debit, and that's, they're not interested in me as a person, whatever it is. The personal trainers were only there if you weren't interested in signing up with them. They didn't want to talk to you and stuff like that. They all knew I was the CEO of Fitness Australia, so it was quite interesting to see that dynamic. But the one where I go now, they work very, very hard at creating that community. They will survive. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And it comes. I think during any time where the community is under stress, you need that community capacity building. You need that sense of collectiveness, connectivity on the rest of it. So, and we reach out as individuals to try and find, I guess, solace and company and reassurance that things are going to be okay, and we're going to get through this, and so on and so on. What business is? Any business that spends time and money, if it needs money, but primarily time, on building those relationships, that sense of community, that sense of family, sense of care, are the ones that are going to survive, and they're going to grow. Whether independent gyms or boutique gyms do that better, because by definition or by perception, they they don't have the franchise or the cookie cutter. Time will tell. But I don't believe that it's not impossible. In fact, as I'm saying, I mean, it's not impossible for any gym, any business, to create that sense of community there. I mean, I was talking to a franchise group the other day, and we have these things in Australia, Maria, called men's sheds. I don't know if you have those in the States. So a men's shed is, they're mainly in regional areas of Australia, and the areas where men, particularly those who've retired or they're unemployed, it's where men can gather safely together, and they'll do things like woodwork or repairing bikes for kids, you know, community sort of work. They've started to die off a little bit because regional area of Australia is also experiencing population movement to the cities. And this gym owner was talking about trying to replicate that men's shed type attitude in a culture in his gym. And I thought, yeah, because we also have a group called Active Farmers, that members of Fitness Australia, which was a group started in regional Australia for a suicide prevention program, using exercise to get to men, being able to start the discussions about mental health and so on and so on. And you know, this is, I guess, a side example of that community importance. Definitely. Exercise, in my mind, can never be seen just as a business or a money maker. It's got to be seen as it started. I mean, your first question you asked me, what's my background, was outdoor education and ancient history. And gymnasium started 2,500 years in Greek times. Yeah. Okay, they were only for men and all the rest of it, but they were there. Exercise was a means to an end, not an end in itself. And that's, I think, where we have to shift partly, and that's how we'll get under essential service.
Go to the gym
not to look good.
Yeah.
And I
feel good because I'm exercising, yes, but also
with other people, I've got that sense of engagement.
Do you see that type of shift in the fitness industry, given everything that we've talked about in the sense of, you know, things like community, things about personal connection, and all in times when everyone feels very, you know, closed down due to COVID? Do you think there'll be that shift in the industry, say, let's say this time next year?
12 months might be a bit of an ask, but I would certainly hope so. I would certainly hope so, because I think that's going to be one of the ways that we are not just going to survive, but actually grow. You've got to demonstrate the value of what we're doing to people beyond your immediate membership. That's when I said before, I think we're living in an echo chamber. I think that's part of the problem. I mean, it strikes me, I started running when I had to give up surfing because I moved away from the water. And I started running to do with my own mental health issues, and I've kept running since then for the same reason. We need to be able to demonstrate. I've just lost my train of thought there for a minute, but we need to be able to demonstrate, I guess, you know, that exercise is not. It's not
just physical.
Yeah.
It's not just physical. Yeah. It is the whole being, the whole person. And, you know, that's how we're going to, if we don't, oh, sorry, I know I was going there. So I find it quite interesting that it's taken mental health organisations to raise the importance of exercise to deal with mental health, rather than us as a sector, but didn't. And that's part of we've got to get out and tell people, because how can we consider ourselves essential when people don't understand why we're essential?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess linking into that, like, you know, over the next 12 months, you know, like, well, between now and say the end of 2022, like, what's the kind of key mission and objectives that, you know, you and obviously Fitness Australia are trying to kind of get across to the industry? You know, where do you kind of see it all going over the next 12, 18 months? Okay,
so there's two things to that answer, Dane. One of the things that happened when we were shut down, so was every other physical activity that took place indoors. So the government considers Pilates, yoga, dance, martial arts, boxing, anything else like that as a gym. Now, so when we were closed down 18 months ago, I got, within about 24 hours, I had some quite irate CEOs of yoga and Pilates groups, dance groups, saying, how dare you shut us down? This is terrible. We're not fitness, all the rest. And I said, sorry, nothing to do with us. This is what's happened because this is where we are categorized by the government, and this is you've been lumped in with us because of that very reason. Now, since that time, we've been working very closely with a lot of those other modalities, advocating on their behalf because they have small budgets and so on and so on. And those partnerships have moved to perhaps even talking about potentially merging, potentially us offering memberships for yoga studios, Pilates studios, because there is no association for those groups in Australia. Opening up our membership base for those Pilates teachers, yogis, dance instructors, and so on. One of the things that came back very closely when we were talking to health departments and government and those modalities is the name of our organisation. So Fitness Australia is not an inclusive name, it is an exclusive name. And I think it hasn't helped us. So when you hear the politicians and health people exercise during lockdowns, not one of them has said the importance of training fitness. Yeah. They've all said the importance of exercise. And when we talk about exercise is not fitness, like fitness is not a sport. Yeah. So we have decided that Fitness Australia will be changing its name to be more inclusive rather than exclusive. We have settled on a new name. I can't share that with anybody at the moment because it's going through the legal technicalities at the moment.
Damn, I was hoping we were going to get an exclusive.
Sorry, mate.
Industry Leaders Podcast, sneak peek of the change.
It's going through the legal technicalities, being able to be registered and so on. But the new name will be much more inclusive. It will be much more aimed at getting us across to, and it's part of the strategy to come back to your question, Dane, of getting us away from sport and into health. And so over the next 18 months, I guess there's multiple things happening, but they're all aimed at the same.
I think that's a good move, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a real good move.
Thanks for that. We did do some consultation, obviously, before we did it, but and we got some very strong feedback that yes, it was a good move. It made sense for a whole lot of reasons. But with the election coming up, we've got to get into the national discussion about where exercise sits. We've got to get into the national discussion about preventative health. So we're working with other organisations, diabetes, cancer disorders and so on, to go to the government jointly and argue for the importance of preventative health programs. Look, that to me has got a fantastic community benefit, because the more that the community is thinking about exercise, the stronger and healthier the community is going to be. But there will be a commercial outcome as well. It'll mean there's been more people graduating to personal trainers and gyms. If you think about the Park Run initiative that started off a few years ago, which I participate in, it's a fantastic initiative to get people thinking about running. Some people out of that will start doing more formalised fun runs. Some of those people will start doing more formalised half marathons, triathlons and so on, exactly the path that I progressed myself 40 odd years ago. So there is a mercenary or commercial benefit in that, but from my point of view, coming from not-for-profit background, the community benefit is much more important. So the priority is to push as hard as we can to try and get sport into exercise, into health, get exercise seen as a preventative health, as essential, and to get the government to commit to a preventative health campaign, public health campaign, like they did with Life Unit last century, like they did with the AIDS campaign, like they did with the anti-smoking campaign, like they've failed miserably to do now with the vaccination campaign. So we need to really ramp all those things up. So it's 3 prongs. Exercise is essential, sport to health, preventative health, public health campaigns.
Yeah.
But
although I think
I think that's just to finish on that, Dane, to be able to be successful on that, we need a strong association. So for people that are sitting out there watching this thinking, should I join Fitness Australia? If you want to help us achieve those, don't sit from the benches, join us, because we'll do that through strength.
Yeah, I think that's the important part there, because I think, at the end of the day, getting that kind of movement within the government and stuff like that, as always, they're going to look at kind of numbers, how many people are behind things, and, the more power to the people, right? So if we can get more people, obviously on board with the mission, it's going to, help push this agenda forward, which I think is, strongly needed, and that's to say the least.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'll hand it over to you, Maria.
Yeah. So, Barry, it's been really great chatting with you today. And to wrap up our episode of the Industry Leaders Podcast, we asked this question to all of our guests. What would be 3 pieces of advice you'd like to share with your audience and the fitness industry as a whole?
3 pieces of advice. We are in the exercise and fitness and strength business. This is a time for you to stay very, very strong in times of difficulty. I also would encourage you to look out for your colleagues that are in the sector as well. Reach out to them, because a lot of the people in our sector are suffering from a whole lot of different things. So look after yourself, look after your colleagues, have faith. We will come out of this, and we're going to come out of this stronger and better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you can see that. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time, especially here in Australia with what we're going through. But like speaking to people like Maria and different colleagues and students that we've got overseas, the industry is bouncing back in different parts of the world.
yeah.
We're just lagging a little bit behind here in Australia, just due to some political decisions that have had ramifications. But moving forward, I think we're going to be fine.
Well, we are essential.
I
End of
agree.
story.
Exactly. All right, Barry. Well, look, thank you very much, mate, for spending the time with us today. We really appreciated having you on. I think there's a lot of good gems there for the industry, and not just domestically too. A lot of lessons that could be taken to our international audience and within their domestic kind of bodies and kind of what they're doing too. I think
I agree.
Australia right now has because we've copped the short end of the stick when it's come to kind of how we've handled COVID this year in particular. We're kind of having to do it, one of the toughest, but I think that resilience will pay dividends long term.
Agreed.
You guys, and I look forward to working with you both to get us out of this and stronger.
Definitely, mate. All right, Barry. Well, I'll leave you to it.